Has your elderly parent or grandparent been acting differently lately? The changes might seem small. Perhaps they're sleeping more, eating less, or showing less interest in family gatherings. But what if these aren't just normal aging signs? When my grandmother began declining, I dismissed these subtle shifts as just getting older. That mistake cost our family precious months of preparation and meaningful moments we can never get back. What most people don't realize is that the body often sends quiet signals 6 to 12 months before someone reaches life's end. These aren't dramatic warnings. They're whispered messages that families frequently overlook until they're looking back with regret. In this video, I'll share the 5 critical signs that often appear in an elderly person's final year. Signs that medical professionals recognize but rarely discuss with families until it's too late. Recognizing these patterns early gives you the irreplaceable gift of time. Time to provide better care, create final memories, and ensure your loved one's journey ends with dignity and peace. If you find this information valuable, please comment with your city below and subscribe to our channel for more insight on navigating life's most challenging transitions. Now let's explore the first crucial sign that many families miss completely. Sign 1. Breathing and circulation changes. From our first breath at birth to our final exhale, breathing marks the fundamental rhythm of our existence. That's why changes in breathing patterns often serve as one of the earliest signals that the body is beginning its natural transition. I first noticed this with my Aunt Rose, who had always been remarkably resilient even at 87. During a Sunday visit, I observed something different. While resting in her favorite chair, her breathing had developed an unusual pattern. Sometimes quick, sometimes with pauses that seemed slightly too long. When I mentioned it, she simply said, "I just need an extra pillow these days, nothing to worry about." Over the following months, these subtle changes became increasingly apparent. Rose needed to sleep with her head elevated on several pillows because lying flat made breathing difficult. She would pause during our conversations to catch her breath, something completely new for her. Walking from her bedroom to the kitchen, a distance she once covered effortlessly, now required a brief rest halfway. Along with these respiratory changes, I began noticing her extremities felt cool to the touch. Even during warm weather, her fingertips occasionally displayed a slight bluish tint that would appear and disappear. The natural rosy tone of her complexion gradually shifted to a softer, paler hue. These changes occur because the body naturally begins conserving energy for vital functions. The heart gradually pumps with reduced force, directing less blood to the extremities to maintain flow to essential organs. The lungs, which have worked tirelessly for decades, become less efficient at oxygen exchange. This isn't a failure. It's the body's ancient wisdom knowing precisely how to manage its remaining resources. For Rose, these changes initially brought frustration. "I can't even finish a sentence without getting winded," she admitted one afternoon. But eventually, she found acceptance and adaptation. We discovered that mornings were her golden hours when her energy peaked. We arranged important family visits then, keeping them briefer but more meaningful. Simple adjustments made remarkable differences. A small fan creating gentle air movement, a lightweight throw for chilly hands, and always those extra pillows. Have you noticed someone you care about needing additional pillows to sleep comfortably or becoming short of breath during simple conversations? These aren't simply inconveniences of aging. They're your loved one's body communicating through the language of breath. By responding with compassion rather than alarm, you create opportunities to provide exactly the support they need during this natural transition. Sign 2. Appetite and weight shifts. Long before other indicators become evident, many families observe changes in their loved one's relationship with food. My neighbor Richard had always been known for his hearty appetite. Seconds at Sunday dinners were his tradition. So when his daughter mentioned his clothes were suddenly loose, it caught my attention. "Dad's disappearing before our eyes," she said worriedly, "even though I'm bringing over his favorite dishes every week." This natural decline in appetite and gradual weight loss often appears so subtly that it's barely perceptible. A belt tightened to a new notch, a wedding ring that twists too easily, clothes that once fit perfectly now hanging loosely on the frame. For Richard, it was his favorite cardigan sweater that suddenly seemed to belong to someone else entirely. What makes this change particularly perplexing is that it occurs even when nutritious, appealing food is readily available. You might prepare your mother's favorite apple pie, the one she's requested for every birthday for decades, only to find she takes a tiny taste and declares herself completely satisfied. Foods that once brought immediate pleasure might now elicit only a polite acknowledgement. Your father might praise your cooking while his plate remains nearly untouched. This happens because the body naturally begins requiring less nourishment as it gradually prepares for life's final transition. The digestive system becomes less efficient, requiring more energy to process substantial meals. Taste perception often changes, making once beloved flavors seem different or less appealing. Even the signals of hunger and fullness transform, creating a natural decrease in appetite that no amount of encouragement can reverse. For many caregivers, this change triggers profound concern. After all, we express love through nourishment. The holiday feasts, the cherished recipes, the gathering around the table. When a loved one stops eating well, it feels like they're declining not just the food, but our care itself. I remember watching my own father push perfect pieces of my mother's pot roast around his plate, my heart sinking with each bite he didn't take. What I've discovered through both personal and professional experience is that emphasizing quality rather than quantity creates more satisfaction for everyone involved. Small, attractively presented portions of favorite foods often bring more pleasure than full plates that overwhelm. When Richard's daughter began bringing him just a small ramekin of his favorite rice pudding, instead of a large bowl, he actually finished it, creating a moment of accomplishment for them both. Have you noticed changes in how your loved one approaches meals? Rather than viewing decreased appetite as a problem to solve, consider it an invitation to discover new ways of sharing nourishment and time together. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't encouraging just one more bite, but creating dining experiences filled with dignity, beauty, and meaningful connection. Sign 3. Increasing rest needs and energy conservation. There comes a moment in life's journey when energy takes on an entirely new significance. My father, who spent 40 years as a carpenter and built our family home with his own hands, gradually reached a point where buttoning his shirt required the same focused determination he once gave to cutting perfect crown molding. This wasn't ordinary fatigue. It was a fundamental shift in his body's energy reserves. This distinctive kind of weariness differs dramatically from the normal tiredness we all experience periodically. It's a profound exhaustion that sleep doesn't fully alleviate. You might notice your loved one requires extended recovery periods after routine activities, perhaps resting for an hour after bathing, or needing a full day to recuperate from a doctor's appointment that once would have been a minor errand. My friend Dorothy, who had hosted weekly bridge games for 30 years, began measuring her days by what she called her energy budget. "I wake up with only so many coins to spend each day," she explained. "Do I spend today's energy getting my hair done or seeing my grandchildren? I simply can't do both anymore." These aren't preferences but necessities as the body's natural resources begin to shift. For many seniors, mornings typically become their prime time, when strength and mental clarity peak. By mid-afternoon, that precious energy begins to diminish. Routine tasks most of us complete without consideration, preparing a simple meal, organizing medications, or walking to the mailbox, gradually require careful planning and extraordinary effort. Physically, this occurs because the cardiovascular and respiratory systems deliver less oxygen to muscles and organs. The body, in its innate wisdom, begins directing limited resources exclusively to essential functions. Cellular energy production that once quickly replenished after activity now works more slowly. It's not laziness or surrender. It's the body's natural conservation of precious resources. For someone who has maintained independence for decades, this change can challenge their fundamental identity. My father, who had always been the family provider and problem solver, found himself needing assistance with tasks he once performed automatically. "I used to frame an entire wall in a day," he said softly, looking at hands that now trembled holding his coffee cup. "Now getting dressed wears me out." Have you noticed someone you care about requiring more rest between activities? Rather than viewing this as something to overcome, consider it an invitation to embrace a gentler pace together and discover the gifts that come with mindful presence. Sign 4. Shifting interests and social engagement. Among the most misinterpreted signs of life's natural transitions is the gradual withdrawal from activities and social connections that once brought fulfillment. My mother had always been our family's social director, planning gatherings, remembering every birthday, and keeping up with neighborhood news. When she began declining invitations and seeming content to sit quietly looking through old photo albums, we wondered what had changed. This natural turning inward isn't depression or withdrawal. It's part of the Spirit's gentle preparation for life's final chapter. You might notice your father, who never missed watching his favorite sports team, now seems uninterested in who's winning. Perhaps your wife, who maintained a busy social calendar for decades, now finds even short visits with dear friends surprisingly tiring. Your husband's woodworking tools, once used daily, might gather dust while he finds contentment watching birds at the feeder outside his window. My friend Edward, who had been active in local politics his entire adult life, gradually stopped reading the newspaper and watching news programs. When I asked if he wanted me to update him on current events, he smiled and said, "I've spent 80 years worrying about the world's problems. I think I've earned the right to focus on what brings me peace now." His wisdom helped me understand this wasn't disinterest, but a natural shift in priorities. This gentle withdrawal often happens because maintaining social connections requires significant mental and emotional energy. Following conversations, remembering names, and processing complex information becomes more challenging as the body conserves resources. Many seniors find themselves naturally drawn to simpler, more meaningful interactions and reflections on their life journey. For families, this change can feel like anticipatory grief. The person is physically present but seems less engaged with the shared world you've known together. My sister expressed this perfectly when she said, "Mom is still here, but somehow not fully here anymore." This creates a unique form of sadness that's difficult to navigate. I've learned that quality of connection matters infinitely more than quantity during this time. Brief, quiet visits focused on simple pleasures often bring more joy than extended gatherings. Sitting together reviewing family photos, holding hands while listening to favorite music, or simply sharing comfortable silence creates beautiful moments of connection that honor where your loved one is today. Sign 5. Recurring health challenges. Throughout our lives, our immune system quietly protects us, fighting countless battles without our awareness. But as the body prepares for life's final chapter, this faithful defender gradually reduces its vigilance. My father, who prided himself on never taking a sick day throughout his career, suddenly found that a simple cold would linger for weeks instead of days. This pattern of more frequent illness and delayed recovery often emerges gradually. You might notice that your mother, who always bounced back quickly from winter bugs, now needs weeks to regain her strength after a similar illness. Perhaps minor injuries that once healed promptly now remain visible for much longer. My aunt's minor kitchen burn, which should have healed within a week, remained tender and visible for over a month. An early indication her body's healing systems were functioning differently. What makes this particularly challenging is how differently illness often manifests in our later years. When my uncle developed a serious infection, he didn't run a high fever or complain of specific pain. He simply became unusually quiet and confused. My grandmother's pneumonia first appeared not as coughing or fever, but as a subtle change in her energy and clarity. The body often lacks the resources to produce the typical warning signals we expect from illness. This happens because the natural aging process affects immune response mechanisms. The skin, our primary barrier against infection, becomes thinner and more vulnerable. Circulation changes mean fewer immune cells reach infection sites. Meanwhile, the inflammatory response that signals infection works more subtly, often masking typical symptoms. It's not a failure, but a natural shift in how the body manages its resources. For families navigating these changes, finding balance becomes essential. When my mother developed her third respiratory infection in 5 months, her doctor recommended hospital treatment. After thoughtful discussion, we opted instead for comfort-focused care at home, with additional oxygen and gentle medications that kept her comfortable without the stress of hospitalization. She recovered just as well, surrounded by familiar comforts and family. Have you noticed changes in how your loved one responds to minor illnesses or injuries? These shifts invite us to think differently about care, focusing less on curing every condition and more on supporting comfort, dignity, and meaningful days. Sometimes the most compassionate care comes not through medical intervention, but through simple presence and comfort during health challenges. Recognizing these natural transitions offers a precious opportunity, the chance to focus on what truly matters. When my mother began showing these signs, our family shifted from anxiety to meaningful presence. We discovered simple joys that created lasting memories. Using just a smartphone, we recorded Mom sharing stories about her childhood during her good moments. My sister created a photo album with large, clear images that became Mom's daily comfort. Rather than complex discussions about medical interventions, we asked gentle questions. What would make today special? Or what small comfort would you enjoy right now? These conversations revealed surprisingly modest wishes, feeling gentle sunshine, hearing a favorite hymn, or simply holding hands in peaceful companionship. The most beautiful moments often emerged unexpectedly. A cardinal at the window feeder bringing Dad immense delight, or Mom suddenly sharing a never-before-told story from her youth. These transitions remind us that love is measured not by doing, but by being fully present. As we've explored these 5 indicators, changes in breathing patterns, appetite reduction, increased fatigue, social withdrawal, and frequent health challenges, remember that recognizing them isn't about predicting the end, but honoring life's final chapter with dignity and presence. When we understand what's happening, we can make more compassionate choices, choosing comfort over unnecessary interventions, meaningful connections over medical procedures, and quality moments over quantity of days. Your simple presence, holding a hand, sharing a memory, or sitting in peaceful companionship is the greatest gift possible. No medical intervention can replace it. I invite you to share your experiences in the comments below. Your wisdom might provide exactly the guidance another family needs today. Remember, we don't choose our final chapter's length, only how beautifully it's written. If you found comfort in these insights, please subscribe for more guidance on navigating aging with grace and dignity.